Hi guys, welcome to Less is More. My name is Dan Wellman and today we'll be looking at exactly what Less is, what it can do and what benefits it can bring you in improving your CSS workflow and keeping your style sheets organised. So first of all, what exactly is Less? Less is a CSS preprocessor. So you write some Less code, run it through a compiler, and pure CSS comes out of the other end. Less isn't the only CSS preprocessor available. A popular alternative is Sass. They're both very similar in terms of features. I just prefer Less because I don't have to have Ruby installed, and I've found that Less is easy to just pick up and run with. Less may or may not stand for anything. As far as I know, it's not officially an acronym for something, although there are plenty of unofficial ones, like Less Evil Style Sheets, coined by Michael Owens. Of course, CSS is rarely evil, and fundamentally it's pretty easy to learn. On my path to become a front-end developer, CSS was the second thing that I learned, after HTML itself. CSS is a static language for describing the appearance of things. It's not a programming language. Learning it is simply a case of remembering the different aspects of things that can be styled and the styles that can be applied to them. There are a couple of slightly more than basic aspects of CSS, such as the different selector combinations that can be used, the cascade and specificity, which can be troublesome at first, but generally it's pretty easy. So why do we need a preprocessor? Less wasn't designed to make CSS easier, it was designed to make CSS better, quicker to write and easier to maintain. It brings some traditional concepts from full programming languages, such as variables and functions, to the static set of rules that make up CSS. One of the problems with CSS is that it's very repetitive, and because it's repetitive, it's wasteful and time-consuming. A large style sheet can have thousands of lines, several style sheets of this length sometimes. But when you scan through one of these style sheets, you'll see that most of it is duplication. So for example, you might want to define some basic styles for navigation links. So you might start out by doing something like this. Okay, just some basic styles here. Okay, sweet. So now you might want to add a nav element to your header for the main site navigation, and that will automatically pick up these styles. But then you might want to add a nav to the footer as well. So then you'll have to do something like this. Maybe you don't want them spaced out quite as much. And maybe they should be a different color. Right, so there's nothing wrong with that, right? And maybe we might want some more links in the footer that aren't part of the main nav, but are still links, like some kind of utility nav. So then you think, okay, right, well, I'm going to have to do something like this. We'll just class that up a bit. Okay, maybe these should be smaller. And a different color. So you can see where I'm going with this, can't you? Each time we want to add some different links with some different styling, our selector chains get longer and therefore they get less efficient, and we keep on having to type the same stuff again, footer, a lot of repetition. And that's only for 3 things. So you can imagine what it gets like when a site is thousands of pages big. It's just ridiculous. Before you know it, you've got a tangled mess of unmaintainable repetition and confusion. It's easy to break, and you find yourself scared of updating it. And that's nothing. It's not uncommon to see selector chains that look something like this. Man, this is boring the hell out of me. See, now that's not great at all. That's what we want to avoid, and that's what Less can help us avoid, as you'll see over the course of this series. There's not really much you can do about this either, due to the nature of CSS itself. I mean, we can try our best to keep things as organized as possible, to avoid the brittleness of styling via ID attributes, trying to keep our selectors as short and simple as possible, maybe introduce a bit of UCSS. But the bigger the sites you work on, the harder the organisation you put in place is to maintain and keep to. So this is what Less, and the other tools like it, were made to overcome. By introducing features like variables that can be reused and classes that can be mixed into other classes, Less can help us to cut out a lot of the repetition found in regular CSS. So we get rid of that nonsense. Less can be run on both the client, inside a browser, and on the server, with something like Node or Rhino. There are multiple ways of using it. We can write Less and then use a tool to compile them into CSS files for us, so that our styles folder still contains actual CSS files. Or we can just keep Less files in our styles folder and have the web server compile and concatenate them into a single minified CSS file when the page is requested. Throughout this series, we'll be using an application called Crunch. This is what Crunch looks like. It's a cross-platform, dedicated Less editor and compiler. I'd recommend that you download and install it now so that you can follow along with the examples. If you already have a Less workflow in place, feel free to continue with that. But if that's the case, you probably already know most of what this series contains. If you're not sure of how stable or capable Less is, bear in mind that Twitter use it in their Bootstrap framework. If one of the most used sites on the internet can leverage it to suit their requirements, I'm sure that any of us can. They even document all of their variables and mix-ins, so we can make use of the Less goodness when working with Bootstrap in our own projects. In this introductory part of the series, we looked at what Less is and how it can help us with our CSS. Next time on Less is More, we'll start writing some Less and look at probably the simplest feature available, variables. Thanks for watching.